Hey everyone, here's kind of an unexpected video. It wasn't what I was originally working on, but I need a little more time to mull that idea over. So here's this one. I'd actually forgotten that I'd applied for the Legends of Runeterra beta a couple of months ago, so it was a nice little surprise to see that the open beta was officially up. And I gave it a go. And it's, we'll get to how it is. Legends of Runeterra is a digital card game, or DCG, based on the massive multiplayer hit League of Legends. It's one of a number of League spin-offs, including the popular auto-battler Teamfight Tactics, and several different games due to come out later this year. Considering the overwhelming popularity of the original game, I'm kind of surprised they didn't go down the card game route earlier. Perhaps they plan to really push League out as a full-on franchise this year or something. I don't know, I'm no economist. Either way, the world of League is fertile enough that you could conceivably make a decent card game out of it, and the champions themselves are unique enough, both in aesthetic and ability, to serve as the standard bearers for this game. So, a recipe for success all around then, right? I can definitely see Runeterra being a success for sure. Will it supplant Hearthstone and Magic Arena to become the DCG monarch? I'm not so sure about that, but it looks good and is accessible enough to provide at least some decent composition there, even though it's not quite as interesting as I would have liked. The game is, as you'd probably expect from a company like Riot, very high budget, and this is reflected in how the game looks, that is to say, pretty nice. The boards themselves are vibrant and detailed, though missing a lot of the clickable bits of scenery that games like Hearthstone have. In their place, however, you do have an adorable little mascot, who is as good as anything to mess around with if you get bored during your opponent's turn. The animations are probably one of the things Runeterra does best, with every card gliding, slamming, or snapping into place when it needs to. The act of actually playing cards or dragging cards up to do battle is extremely satisfying, and the way that each unit savagely clashes with its opponent is appropriately visceral. This is something that the Magic Arena developers got spot on too, with each unit smashing into its target with a satisfying thud. It's certainly a step above Hearthstone, which resembles more a playground game of conkers than a mighty duel between opponents. The art direction for the cards themselves strikes a nice middle ground between detail and cartoon, not being as off-puttingly wacky as Hearthstone can be, while still being more distinctive than, say, Mythgard. It doesn't dethrone Gwent as the current reigning monarch of amazing fantasy card art in my opinion, but the art is colourful and entertaining to look at nonetheless. There's an option to view the full art of a card by clicking an icon when looking at the card closely, which is a great thought and something I wish other DCGs had. At first, I thought that these full-size views were the only way to gain context and lore hints for the cards, and I was a little disappointed that a lot of the standard-sized cards didn't seem to capture the full essence of what the card was about. Take Jinx's card for example, which cuts off not only part of her arm, but also the fact that she's lying on a bed, messing around with what looks like a huge grenade launcher. Or look at Brown, who seems to be a brawny looking man, but nothing much else until you enlarge the card and see that he's actually punching a monster directly in the face and pulling what looks like a giant treasure chest at the same time. It seems that the reason they had to trim the images down is because the full art is drawn as a landscape image rather than a portrait one. If the space designated for the image on the card was a landscape rectangle, like in the Pokemon TCG, then it would have made sense to have card art that coordinates with this orientation. But the cards in Legends of Runeterra are portrait, with the art taking up much of the card's vertical space, making me a bit confused as to why they were drawn to be more horizontal. The cards are similarly truncated when they're placed on the board, giving your forces a really strange and not very convincing board presence. The art does, however, widen as soon as you drag a unit up to attack, turning sometimes underwhelming images into units that look like they're actually ready for battle. I feel like this choice was made in order to give cards a bit more presence when they actually go forward to attack, and this is effective. That said, if I'm going to be looking at the cards on the board most of the time, and the board's set out like a battlefield, I want to be able to see what my units are even when they're not attacking. For example, let's take the Gwent card Siege. We see a soldier on the hill in the foreground, overseeing rows of trebuchets that bombard a city in the distance, and that's all the information we need out of the card in that small space. Even though there's no conventional battle system in Gwent, just the card being on the board gives it a sense of presence. So ultimately, I'd say to draw your own conclusions from this little nitpick. I can definitely see people saying that just having the full card art in battle is enough, but to me a card should always feel like it's making the intended impact on the board, not just when it's involved in one aspect of play. Overall, Legends of Runeterra certainly is nice to look at. There's nothing really groundbreaking here. You might find that a common theme in this review, but the animations and the overall aesthetic do a really good job of presenting the game. Next, let's move on to a not so flashy, though no less important, aspect of Runeterra. When talking about a card game, it's especially important to talk about how the cards are acquired. For most card games, physical and digital, this requires buying loads of booster packs and ploughing loads of money into the game in the hope that you'll eventually find the card that you want. I have a ton of mostly unformed thoughts about the ethics of this system that might find their way into a video sometime in the future, but for now I'm just going to say that I feel that's exploitative and you should buy the singles whenever possible. Oh, and gacha games are literally the same thing and you should stop playing those as well. Almost all digital card games tend to be free to play, where you'll be able to install the game and try it out for free, with the idea being that you'll enjoy it enough to buy packs and cosmetics as a result. In this system, you usually don't just earn the cards by paying for them. Most DCGs reward you with some sort of in-game currency to buy packs with after fulfilling challenges or winning battles. DCGs usually have a secondary currency with which you can craft specific cards that you want. This currency can usually be gained through battle or by converting unwanted cards. Magic Arena is a notable exception, giving players wild cards of different rarities that can be exchanged for a card of the same value, rather than allowing you to get rid of unwanted cards and save up for others. Runeterra's approach is to just combine most of the above. The game doesn't offer booster packs for sale, but you can buy coins that can be exchanged for wildcards like in Magic, allowing you to effectively pay for whichever card you want or need. This cuts out the mind-numbing process of buying pack after pack in the hope that you pull the right card, and while the price per individual card may seem steep at first, it only takes a moment's thought to realise how much money you're saving by not having to dig through useless packs full of junk. This is a massive improvement to the same old stale DCG economy that we've seen before, and it makes me want Runeterra to be a success solely so that future games use this system too. These coins can also be spent on cosmetics, such as custom boards to personalise your play area, and little mascots that sit alongside you in a game. Boards cost around £9 and mascots £5, which I feel is a little steep, but I can definitely understand if someone who played this game a ton wanted to just pimp out their experience a little bit. Now, let's talk about the reward system. From the menu, players choose a particular region's reward tree based on one of the game's 6 main factions. As you complete challenges and play matches, you gain XP and progress up the tree's nodes, gaining a new gift whenever you reach the next node. These gifts take the form of wildcards, as well as chests and capsules of different rarities, each containing better loot the further you move along the tree. Even playing just against the AI, I'm able to gain enough XP to complete a node after a battle or two, which is very generous considering how stingy certain other games can be. Even if you're not doing so well in ranks, if you're losing and maybe not ranking up as quickly as you want to, you're still making good progress towards getting some new cards. It's a nice little bit of positive feedback in a genre that usually wants you to feel bad that you're not making progress and will, as a result, buy packs to get better cards. Time will tell if Runeterra continues this player-friendly attitude throughout further expansions, or whether it's something they're only deploying early on in the game's life to get ahead of the competition. I wouldn't put it past a AAA developer to try and lure people in with this tactic, and then ramp up the manipulation once they're hooked. For the time being though, everything seems pretty fair. If you enjoy the gameplay enough to play a lot of matches, you'll be rewarded regardless of how you're doing. And speaking of the gameplay, When talking about a card game, it's pretty important to know the rules, so I'll try my best to summarise them as briefly as possible here. Prior to playing a game, players construct a deck comprised of 40 cards, including units, spells, and champion cards, which are more powerful units capable of becoming stronger if you meet certain conditions. The game proceeds in a number of rounds, during which each player uses a turn to play one card from their hand by spending the mana listed at the top of the card. Mana refills at the start of every round, and surprise surprise, each player gains 1 mana per round. Each round, one player is attributed an attack token, allowing them to declare an attack anytime with any number of units they control. During an attack, the opponent can respond defensively, blocking attacks with their own units and casting spells to change the tide of battle. Once both players decide to continue, the attacking units strike, and then play returns to normal until both players pass. Once they do, the attack token flips over to the opponent, and a new round begins. And so on until one player's nexus has been destroyed and the game is over. The battle system is mainly what sets the game apart from its competitors, and it does add an interesting sense of strategy. As you're forced into either attacking or defending each round, you're prompted to start planning ahead for your next turn, rather than just falling back into a flowchart mentality. As you can play cards during your enemy's attacking turn, you have to ask yourself whether to overcommit in an attempt to push an attack through, or if those cards in your hand would be better spent responding to an opponent directly. The way that rounds work also breaks from the norm a bit, with the 1 card per player call and response system giving each player a chance to set up their board and react to the opponent. While it means that you need to use your turns wisely to keep up in tempo, it also means that there's less chance of your opponent, say, spending all their mana to destroy your board than building a huge army of units to destroy you with. Something that's eminently possible and always demotivating in other card games. You have more of a chance to respond to that sort of strategy here, and the heaviest board wiping spells are slow to activate anyway, so you can counter them or mitigate heavy damage if you're able to. Speaking of mana, while the mana system is similar to other DCGs, there's a small twist to it here. At the end of your turn, if you have any unspent mana, up to 3 can be stored in a separate pool, but this mana can only be used for casting spells. While this doesn't let you back into the game easily if you're drawing too many high cost cards in the early turns, it at least gives you a bit of a chance if you're forced to pass without playing anything. So that is quite nice. The last thing that I really liked was the champion system. The champion cards are a special form of unit that represent the champions in League of Legends, and they're probably the most hype and exciting cards included in this game. After all, who doesn't want to play as their favourite characters? I mean, if you've played League, I'd just pick the cool spider lady. As these characters are such a big deal, you'd hope the developers would include an interesting mechanic to go along with them. And they do deliver. Champions are played with a mana cost like any unit, but there's a twist this time. If you meet a certain condition written on the cards, the champions will level up, transforming into a new card and gaining powerful effects as a result. The level up mechanic feels fresh and has plenty of flavour, given that leveling up is key to League of Legends. I like the way that champions are shaping up, and I look forward to the mechanic being expanded on further in the future. Will there be non-champion cards whose effects activate when you level up? Maybe cards that get stronger if you have a leveled up champion on the field. There's a lot of potential to develop upon this system, and I hope Riot work on it in future expansions. So, you may have noticed by this point that the only things I've talked about liking are the things that are unique to Runeterra, the things that make it individually interesting. And, there's a reason for that. There are a few design choices that make Runeterra feel unique, but I don't feel the rest is original or interesting enough to positively comment on. To the game's detriment, Riot played it incredibly safe, tweaking little bits of the established DCG formula, and by that I mean Hearthstone rules, while keeping the vast majority of it the same. You probably noticed a little bit of snark seep in when I was explaining the game's mana system earlier, and yeah, I couldn't really help myself there. It's not that it's necessarily a bad mana system, but, you know, Hearthstone already did that, and taking a brief foray through Steam's free-to-play card games will show you that many DCGs have decided to follow its example. Even the few games that don't copy Hearthstone exactly still use a 1 mana per turn system, even if they require you to do something like discard a card from your hand to get that mana. While it might be a tried and tested system that theoretically works while balancing cards, do we have to see it in loads of different games? Did we have to see it in this one? And it's not just the mana system, the stat distribution in cards is exactly the same too, with units having a health and an attack stat. Again, not exactly a fundamental design flaw, but it does mean that a lot of the interactions between cards end up playing out in a similar way to other games. Whether through effects or in combat, you're comparing the same stats in the same way. As a result, the card effects end up feeling a bit samey too. We're dealing with similar stats that we've seen in the past, so it makes sense that effects would also be similar to previous games. So yes, there's a lot of deal 1 damage here, or give allies +1/+1 here, the obligatory insta-kill effects, board wiping effects, and give something keyword effects. This isn't the case for all of Runeterra's cards. I really like the Undying, which revives and boosts itself at the start of every round. This synergizes well with decks that like to kill their own units to gain power, because you can just kill the Undying and he'll come back. I also really like the Poison Puffcap archetype, which revolves around spawning these trap cards in your opponent's deck that damage your opponent when they draw them. So there is some unique stuff in here, but to me it's overshadowed by the card effects that are just retreads of older games. Again, I get why they did it, this is a first set and everything, but it's not drawing me in, it's not intriguing me in any way. Maybe they'll get a little crazier with it in future expansions, but I've already played DCGs like this before. Why would I want another one exactly like it? I acknowledge that a lot of the things I've talked about here, costing mechanics, boosting, attacking, these are things that most card games have in common, and I wasn't expecting this game to reinvent the wheel or anything, but you don't see the same unoriginality in physical TCGs. Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Weiss Schwarz, all of these card games feel completely different to play, so it's not like the card game format is the issue here. I just don't think that Riot were creative or daring enough to take a chance and do something different with the game. You'd think a company that was such a high profile staple would be able to take a couple of risks and go a bit crazy with its game design, but instead we have an experience that feels very similar in a lot of ways to a lot of DCGs. The thing that's most annoying is that this game doesn't really feel like an adaptation of the source material at all. Now, granted, they don't necessarily have to, this could just be any old card game using League characters, but it only takes a sideward glance at other DCGs to see much more potential that could have been used. The much maligned Artifact, an adaptation of the Dota series, at least tried a few different mechanics, such as the sharpened lane system, to make you feel a bit more like you were playing a MOBA-inspired card game. There was potential to do that sort of thing here too. The champions are fairly unique and flavourful, so why wasn't this creative philosophy carried over into the game's mechanics overall? It's just all a bit of a shame. I haven't played Runeterra at all since the first couple of days of its release, not counting the times I captured footage for this video of course. It's a shame, because sometimes I need a bit of a break from Gwent as my main card game, and I was really hoping that this game would be able to fill that void. Sadly, I just wasn't impressed or intrigued enough by Runeterra. I don't think it does enough to set itself apart from the pack, and it feels kind of dry as a result. The monetization and reward system are both excellent, but if I'm just bored by the game, then that doesn't really matter, does it? A lot of this review will, as ever, be subjective, depending on what you're looking for from a card game. If you don't really care about playing with a copy and pasted mana system and cards, you might enjoy having to think about battle in a different way. It's just not enough for me, unfortunately. Having played so many games with this same system, I'm just kind of tired of it now. However, the thing that really kills the experience for me is considering just how much potential was wasted here. Instead of building an innovative and unique card game that adapted the MOBA format of the original IP, Riot have leaned heavily on a formula that's already established and popular, playing it safe rather than using all of their resources to just take a chance. This lack of ambition is ultimately disappointing if you are hoping for a DCG that did more than try to repackage the same old, same old. Thanks, as ever, for watching the video. Sorry it took so long to make. I had to really consider my points in this one, like whether my own prejudices against these sorts of games were getting in the way of me giving a fair analysis. Whether I've accomplished that is up to you guys, of course. I want to get a video out a bit sooner next time, so I'll be looking for some easier subject matter. This was actually meant to be that easier subject matter, but the video ended up being longer than my last one, it seems. I can't win, I guess. Make sure to take it easy, and more importantly, do keep safe during these troubling times. I'll see you guys next time.